everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to UC Davis and our speaker tonight. This gentleman, you might be aware of, is a lifelong revolutionary fighter. Will be introduced formally in 1 minute. I want to introduce the person that will introduce him. We have a celebrity in our midst, Mr. Stan Atkinson from KCRA. If we could welcome him down for an introduction.
It's a great pleasure to do this because the man that you're going to listen to is kind of a Dutch uncle for me in my life and my career. He met me when I was a rather idealistic little young reporter in my mid-20s in the bowels of South Vietnam in the very early 1960s, 1962 in fact, long before Americans even knew where there was, or that there was a South Vietnam. Bernie was, the microphone. Yeah, we do use microphones in this business. I sometimes forget that. When I first met Bernie Yo in 1962 in the far south of South Vietnam on the Cam Mau Peninsula, he was serving as a liaison and a strategist and a helpmate for the most unforgettable character of my life, a Chinese Catholic priest named Father Nguyen Lac Qua, who had at the time probably the most effective fighting force against the VC. And at that time, that was the dirty little war in Vietnam, long before we got into it and the war escalated, when the war was really a matter of insurgency and counterinsurgency. And this man was a past master at it with the guidance of the man you're going to hear from tonight, who is absolutely one of this country's major past masters in the art of guerrilla warfare and the art of psychological warfare. You're going to hear tonight from my dear and old friend, my Dutch uncle, Bernie Yo. Bernie.
Thank you, Stan. I was going to clarify this point myself a little later, but since Stan mentioned, I'm known in Washington, D.C. and other places as Bernie Yo. The name on the poster, Xin Su, is my real name, my Chinese name. And the picture, if you look at the picture and they say, this guy doesn't look like the guy on the picture, well, that's me also. It happened to be my photograph 40 years ago, exactly 40 years ago. The reason I use this photograph for this poster is this. 40 years ago, in fact this month, April, was the transition point from a simple guerrilla fighter into a revolutionary. And from that day on, I have been a revolutionary and I still am one. Exactly the same cause, the same revolution I dedicated myself to 40 years ago. First, let me this is the word, the characters, two characters for revolution in Chinese. Ge Ming. Unlike the English word revolution that has a connotation of something revolving and has no basic value attached to it. The revolution could be a good one, could be a bad one, could bring disaster, could bring great success, or great forward movement. In Chinese, there is no such thing as a bad revolution. Ge is improvement, Ming is life. So it means improvement of life. So to a Chinese, a revolution is always good. And I guess this is the reason why one of the more well-known revolutionary, Mao Zedong, every time he finds something he couldn't get accomplished, he looked for a solution through revolution. The last one was the great proletarian culture revolution I'm sure you've heard much about. and caused quite an upheaval to the country. In fact, when Deng Xiaoping was interviewed by the Italian journalist Oriano Fallaci, Fallaci asked him how many communist members were killed during that revolution. He said, he just waved it, so many, don't even ask. Even I don't know how many. So she said, well, you know, couldn't be as many as Stalin. Oh, no. So we killed more. He said, you know, slightly, we killed more. So communists, not other people. You know, it's important to remember Khrushchev's 20th Party Congress mentioned thousands and thousands of loyal party members were killed during Stalin's rule. This is the reason why I purposely have this poster, hoping that people who are really dedicated to revolutionary causes would come and meet me, because I have put in a lot of thoughts behind revolution. Yes, revolution is important. The world cannot stand still. We must change. We must move forward. And furthermore, I like revolutionaries because they are the moving forces. For right or wrong, they change things. Without revolutionaries, the world would be a very dull place to live in. But on the other hand, too many times revolutionaries are blinded by their emotional or romantic ideas. Yes, revolutionaries are always romantic. That is a foregone conclusion. Yet you cannot let romanticism totally control your mind and your judgment. You've got to understand that you have to have an objective. What is the objective for the revolution? Number one. Number two, the processes. How to achieve the revolution, with what kind of operation, methodology. Third, the final result, whether it is in accordance with the original objective or whether it can be a reversal. It would be a sad thing if the end result is totally the reversal of your original aim. And this is why it's so important today to evaluate, to understand the past, because only with the past we learn where do we go for the future. When we talk about revolution, most people immediately start thinking the term of revolution of which Marx, Lenin started, and Mao. And yeah, it's understandable, because they are truly promoters of revolution. They go around anxiously, actively promote revolution. And yet, how many people actually involved in the revolutionary movement of Marxism-Leninism truly understand what Marxism-Leninism means? Very few. I, for one, spent the last 40 years studying the total concept of Marx, Lenin, and Mao. Because unless you understand it, you cannot be for it or against it, because you don't know about it. Nothing comes by accident. Marx's revolution is a big revolution. No joke about it. I carry this around all the time. I carry this. This is the third copy. In fact, the other copies are worn out. Why is this so powerful that today 1/3 of our human race is living under this system? Full 1/3. 1.6 billion people. Oh yes, you've heard of China being changing and toward capitalism, whatever you want to call it, free market system. But repeatedly, the government has reiterated that our system is based on Marx, Lenin, Mao, or even Stalin. There's still, the Chinese communists are still Stalinists. The most powerful phrase right there, Marx said, but communism abolishes eternal truth. It abolishes all religion and all morality instead of constituting them on a new basis. It therefore acts in contradiction to all past historical experience. In contradiction to all past historical experience, which means we have nothing to measure it with. Nothing of the past we can use to measure even what communism is. Abolishes eternal truth. Stop and think. What is eternal truth? Laws of nature. Abolished. All religions. What does it mean? Frontal declaration of war against God. Don't say he's not bold. He is. Very bold. No other ideology in the past has ever gone that far. You have people who with different beliefs, even atheism, who do not believe, but not powerful, said, abolish it. And all morality. No morality. Interesting enough, Lenin, before he died, he was rather disillusioned. He said this proletarian morality we talk so much about, I don't see it. In fact, right now, I would have any morality, even bourgeois morality, than no morality at all. It's interesting he made this statement. It was in the Lenin's work, 43rd or 44th volume. He wrote 45 volumes, this thick. Very interesting. He was disillusioned. But he was a lucky one. He was really the last of the Russian revolutionaries. Have you ever heard of Bukharin? I've heard of him. Huh? Oh, was he a big shot. Marshal, creator of the Red Army, Bukharin. What happened to him? Bang. Executed by communists, not others. Zinoviev, have you ever heard that name? Zinoviev? Big shot. Wow, was he important. Tortured to death. Tukhachevsky. You know who Tukhachevsky, Marshal Tukhachevsky was? Tukhachevsky was the military leader, put down the, first staged the coup, took the power from the Mensheviks for the Bolsheviks. Then he put down the rebellion in 1938. 1939, he was executed. Yes, who was the last comrade of Lenin? Who? The very last one. Trotsky, of course. Yes, he escaped to Mexico. He was in hiding. Do you think they can let him live? No. because he was a revolutionary. Descended a Spaniard, I think, Ramon, his name was. First name was Ramon. Killed with an ice hatchet, chopped him up. This Ramon is in Soviet Union right now. He's alive after release from the jail in Mexico. It's a strange revolution. When you win is when you die. Yeah, every one of them. Oh, the list is long. Yeah. Yet, there's another revolution nobody talks about. And what revolution is that? The revolution that made this meeting possible. Here I am, a man from China, comes to this campus in California to talk about revolution. Where is the CIA or FBI man sitting here taking notes or record what I have to say tonight? None. Prohibited by law to watch me or anybody else, to talk about revolution, revolt, rise up, world revolution yet. Why? Have you ever stopped and think, what gives this country such tremendous amount of whatever you want to call it, freedom, liberty, license even, whatever. What? Revolution again. This is the biggest revolution the world has ever had. It's 200 years old, and yet nobody understands the basic principles of this revolution. That's what's wrong with it. Americans don't understand America. In fact, 6 months ago, I was invited to Louisiana to give a speech. Precisely, the title was, What Makes America Tick? That one, I got paid for it. I got paid $2,500 for that speech. Yeah. And precisely, I was up there telling 500-600 Americans what makes America tick. The reason is you were born here, you take things for granted. When you have something, any restriction, you get very unhappy. My freedom, my privacy. See? You go outside of this country, even cross the border to Canada. Do you realize during that peak of the separatist movement in the province of Quebec, the Canadian police raided families at 3 o'clock in the morning and to search for the separatist leaders and so on? Yeah? Anytime there's a threat happened, they do a lot of things. England, one of the original human rights, human freedom authority, came down from the Magna Carta, took the power from the king. They have Secrecy Act. A newsman like Stan Atkinson cannot go on the air and say everything and anything he wants. There's certain things, military things, unavailable. Many things during the war, they have a 30-year ceiling. So you have to wait 30 years to get freedom of information, to shake loose all the documents. Yes, 39 years ago, I arrived in this country, midnight. I arrived in San Francisco. The first maiden flight of Chinese nationalists airline. When you arrive in San Francisco at midnight, it's quite interesting, very impressive. I walked on the street and watched the people. I've been abroad before. I was in Europe when I was a teenager. And I guess after being a guerrilla fighter, you have an extra sense of your surroundings, good or bad. And that night when I walked on the street of San Francisco, I sensed there's something very mysterious to me about this country. There's magic in the air. And I said to myself, I must find out what that magic is. The secret, what makes America tick. Because I'm sure you realize the Chinese are the most chauvinistic people in the world. Now we think the entire world revolves around us. That's why in China we call Zhongguo, the country of the center. So as a Chinese, as a chauvinist, I thought if I could steal the secret, what makes America tick, and take it back to China, we'll have China the most powerful, the richest country in the world. Because we know, everybody knows, Chinese are smarter than anybody else. So that night, I vowed, that's what I want to do. I tried. I went everywhere, tried to find out, asked learned professors, Harvard, Yale, Columbia, well-known people. Fortunately, I have a lot of friends, a lot of channels I could utilize to get the entree to these learned scholars. But they gave me a blank look. What do you mean, what makes America work? We have a two-party system, 3 branches of government. We have a constitution. That's why. And then when you push any further, they'll say, I said, if I take all this, a two-party system, 3 branches, and everything else, and the Constitution to China, will it work? Will it have the same result? And they look at me and say, but you're not American. See? So I couldn't find out what makes America tick. But I don't give up. Never give up. I put it in the back burner and did my things. But still always keep an eye on watching. At the same time, I studied what makes Marxism tick, what makes Lenin's revolution result in this situation. I'm sure Lenin did not want Russian people to go through what they actually went through, the amount of sufferings, deaths, and so on. One day, many, many years later, as a matter of fact, it was 1963, after our meeting, I guess, I was asked a very strange request. A country had an upheaval. They needed a new constitution, and they asked me if I would help them to do some research for a new constitution. Oh, so I said, okay. So I went to the Library of Congress and the National Archives, since I live in Washington, and tried to do some research. I spent 3 days, used up about 2 or 3 yellow pads. At that time, there was 103 nations in the world. Now we have more. It was very interesting. I found that the smaller the country, bigger the words they use in their official documents. In fact, I found this interesting thing, that the Soviet Constitution is not a bad constitution at all. They actually include the American First Amendment into the Constitution itself, which in effect makes it even stronger, that the personal liberties, the religious freedom, assembly, expression is to be guaranteed. Did you know that, by any chance? In Soviet, it's in the Constitution itself. Only one part in the Constitution I didn't like. It says since the Soviet Union is dedicated to the workers, those who do not work do not eat. Oh, that's right in the Constitution. And I'm a lazy guy, sometimes I don't feel like working, so it's not a good thing. Many interesting things happen, in the research. Then in the afternoon, it was an April day, interesting, and Washington, if you've been to Washington, you know there are only few days in the spring and few days in the autumn. That's absolutely beautiful. Other days you can have it. It's either cold or wet or hot and terrible. Now, that happened to one of those days, and I was walking out of the National Archive, and there it was the Constitution of the United States, framed, original, and I looked at it. I walked up to the document, and I said, "What is your secret?" I talk to documents as well as people and animals, and it looked at me and said, the 4 years for the presidency and 6 years for the Senate, and very cold, mechanical, no warmth or nothing. Yeah, okay, sorry, you don't want to tell me your secret. So I was, going out the place. And then I felt sort of a strange feeling. A hand was pulling me back on this side. There were two sides. I turned around and looked. I said, I know you. Declaration of Independence. Every 4th of July, I hear you on the radio, on television. Somebody will be reciting it. I know about you. Well, goodbye. Thank you. No, that day somehow I got pulled back. I looked at it, and there was a fancy W, start with. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands that are connected with them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the equal but separate stations to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. It was strange that here is a document that can write out, say, the laws of nature and nature's God. Suddenly I realized what I'm reading is something that is so totally different. Remember this? Karl Marx declared, abolishes eternal truths. Karl Marx abolishes natural law, the laws of nature. Thomas Jefferson said, in accordance with laws of nature and nature's God. Strange. But it was the language that it's so pleasing, so unpretentious. I said, that's nice. And then I looked further, another W. We believe these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Endowed by their Creator. What does it mean? That men are created. The rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness does not come from the government or from the party or from anybody else. It's given to men by God. What a difference does it make? That somehow that day I realized the fundamental difference of this as just a simple political document and a collective dedication. Interesting enough, only in America, if you are an atheist, you are an atheist, genuine atheist. You are free to do so. More than that, of course, here in California, you have all kinds of Satan's temples, and you want to worship devil? Go ahead. Go to the devil. You have freedom to do so. Strange, because as a nation, collectively, you recognize that men are created by God. Isn't that strange? The collective dedication and the personal freedom. The Soviet Union, under the communism, the party is basically neutral, atheistic. Huh? And yet, do you realize in Soviet Union you are not truly atheist? Because you have to believe in atheism. When you're forced to believe anything, that belief is not real. It's not yours. Because you are under the system, you have to. Unless you are an atheist, you cannot join the Communist Party. If you're not a member of the Communist Party, you cannot get good jobs. You cannot even enter college. Can you imagine? And that's in Soviet Union, there really is only one college, one university, Moscow University. All my friends came from Moscow University, the ones that defected. Those are the ones that exposed to what the world is like. Vasily, I talked to him he's in Washington today. Unfortunately, I missed him. Vasily is a kid, 22 years old, bright, straight A student, Moscow University. He was so good in languages. He speaks fluent English and fluent Korean. And because of that, he was sent to Korea as an exchange student. He studied in the Pyongyang University for 4 months. And the minute he had the chance, he was a tourist on DMZ, on the 38 parallel. And when he saw there wasn't anybody looking, he made a mad dash across the border. And the North Korean soldiers started shooting at him, and the South Koreans shot back and killed the 2 North Korean soldiers. There was quite a gun battle. And that guy, he must be a pretty good runner. He zigzagged. He was in scratch on him. And we're good friends now. He comes to visit me. He's in Harvard in the PhD program. That shows you how bright the guy is. He took a course. He didn't want to be dependent on anybody. He took a course in refrigeration. And he has a job. Now he takes care of the Marriott hotels, all their cooling plants and everything else. He's working full-time and taking his PhD course at night and so on. Really quite a guy. And I learned awful lot from him. He was the first guy I ever met that actually spent time in North Korea. You know, it's a sort of a forbidden place. It's truly more mysterious to me than the moon, because I've never met anybody from North Korea. And he told me many interesting things, such as in North Korea, people eat meat 4 times a year, only 4 times. And once, the most important one, you get most of the meat is on the president's birthday. That day he gets more meat than any other day. He said the place was so terrible that even makes Soviet Union look like a paradise. It's that bad. So it's very interesting. So, you know, when you stop and think and compare, America is very special, unique place. But unfortunately, people don't understand it. You have to understand. Because if you don't understand what makes it run, without knowing it, you may lose it. And when you face an adversary like communism, ideology, you also have to know it. If you don't know it, you may fall into the trap. You may just get fooled. And unfortunately, not enough people understand the basic revolution of Marx, Lenin, and today Gorbachev, and the revolution of Jefferson, Lincoln, and today Ronald Reagan. He is a worthy custodian of those principles. He is trying his best to fulfill that revolution. And as an example why this country is truly a revolutionary country. A couple months ago, we celebrated the birthday of Martin Luther King. And he was the only revolutionary in recent times. He revolted against the system. He violated the local laws by marching, by end up being put in jail. He revolted. And yet what happened? He didn't get killed. He didn't get tortured. He was honored as a hero. That's why I particularly am interested to talk about this subject, because I want you people, young people, to realize what a magnificent revolution your founding fathers created. And today, only by sharing the same revolution with people of other countries all over the world that we can have peace. Can you imagine if Russian people, Chinese people, Polish people, Cuban people, Estonians, Latvians, Lithuanians, Bulgarians, Albanians can freely travel and talk to you, students, like this kid Vasily. He's such a delightful person. And exchange ideas. No more nuclear war. No people want to fight, want to kill, want to suffer. War is hell. I've been through too many of them. I was there because I had to. The honor of being a free person is at stake. That's why I fought. Sure, you have to. That's what makes you an honorable human being. When Vietnam was threatened, yes, I went to Vietnam between 1955 and 66. I spent a lot of time in that country because I knew then that if we don't help them, misery will go on the people. A lot of people didn't believe that. Vietnam was under Chinese occupation for 1,000 years, under French colonialism for 100 years, under Japanese occupation during World War II, then during Civil War. You've heard about this horrible American bombs and napalms. The Vietnamese people did not leave. There were no boat people. Only when the communists took over. Their own people, Vietnamese, for the first time after more than 1,000 years, Vietnamese people was running the country. Peace. Except they went and invaded Cambodia. That's another thing. Cambodia did not invade Vietnam. And the people left. Leaky boats. They estimate probably half didn't make it. The first time a boat people arrived in Washington, I took the family to a Chinese restaurant and talked to them. This lady who was a school teacher, I said, what made you leave in that leaky boat? I said, did you expect to make it here in the United States? No. I said, I expected to die on the sea. Well, why did you do it? He said, simple. It's better to die in a quick death on the sea than die slowly under communism. So, it's not one person, two person, thousands. And every case, remember when Cuba opened up a little bit? Boat people, thousands start to flood. In fact, there was a joke in circulating around Moscow. Brezhnev asked Andropov, hey, what's this? I heard that many Cubans going to America. Andropov, you know who he was, the secret policeman. He said, oh yeah, Castro said, anyone who wants to leave can go, so to get rid of the bad elements. So that's why they went. And Brezhnev said, hey, that seems to be a good idea. Let's do that too. Let's say anyone who wants to leave can go. Andropov said, no, we can't do that. He said, if you do that, you and I were the only people left. Brezhnev said, speak for yourself. Yeah. Of course, you heard that in front of a hospital, a huge line, and they asked, why is this line? Oh, he said, oh, a lot of people, all men, no women. How come? Oh, they asked to be circumcised because they heard that the Jews are allowed to leave. You know? Those all came from the Soviet Union, those stories. This is why I paid my own fare. I left Washington this morning to come here to speak to you about world peace through world revolution, because I believe it. Because only through freeing the people, those Russian people, those Ukrainians, those Estonians, Latvians, those Poles, Romanians, Bulgarians, yeah. And of course, people of Afghanistan, they really deserve your support. They are fighting every day, dying mercilessly. Those are just great people, I know. In fact, a young student of Georgetown University, handsome, smart. In fact, the last thing he did, he cooked me a terrific Afghan dinner with those huge bread, delicious Afghan bread. And he said goodbye. He said, I'm going back and to fight. I said, hey, no. I said, you're too valuable here. You know, talk to American people. You're so intelligent, speak perfect English. I said, no, I must do my duty like my countrymen, my family. They're all fighting. He went back. He was killed. Yeah. So, yes, I want you to dedicate yourself to the cause of freedom, revolution. Only when we can talk truly, people to people, with people, Russia, China, Cuba, and Nicaragua. I'm sure you're flooded with talk about Nicaragua and the Contras. How many people have told you that the so-called Contras were formerly anti-Somoza rebels? Every one of them. Yes. I know so many of them. As a matter of fact, Geraldine, one of these days, if I have a chance, I'll see if I can arrange for her to come and speak to you here. She was a Maryknoll nun, left the order, married a Nicaraguan in the movement, for the labor movement, fought against the Somoza way back before the Sandinistas got into the picture. And today they're living in Miami, trying to raise little money to help fight against the Marxists, Leninists. So, young people, the world is yours. I had a great life. You know, fighting isn't all bad. Sometimes you can have fun too. I've been around the world many, many times, seeing many great things and involved in many causes. But your future, it's your world. Remember, until you can freely communicate with people, it's the most controlled item in Soviet Union is what? Huh? Copying machine. Yes, a Xerox machine. Every sheet is registered. Lesniev, cellist, great Moscow Symphony cellist. He's a friend of mine. He comes to my house to play all the time. You know, I started as a musician. That's another story altogether. He said, only in Soviet Union the musicians have to copy every part by hand today. Can you imagine? You know, Xerox machine, I don't care about for anybody else. For musicians, it's God sent. You know, you just put a big score underneath and just push the button. Well, first violin, second violin, oboe, cello, bassoon, timpani, you know, In no time, you get a whole orchestra all copied. By hand, every sheet of paper. Do you know, most of you don't know, there is such thing called mimeograph machine. You know, have you ever heard of that? You know, with a hand, wax paper, you can write or you can type on it. You cannot find it in Soviet Union. Can you imagine? So, please, keep that in mind. It's your world. Until 1.6 billion people, 25 nations, are free to determine for their own fate, I don't think we have much of a future either. I can go on this, on and on, I'm never stop. You might have some questions. You can ask me any question you like. If I can answer, I'll be glad to answer. And if I can't, I'll fake it. But in the meantime... You can call me anytime, you can write to me if you want to, but I don't write very often, so if you don't get too mad at me if I don't answer you right away. Yeah?
Well, I was one of the both people, so I guess we can both. My question is this.
Am I right about Vietnam?
Yeah.
Okay.
My question is, one of the things the communists is known for is a violation of human rights. And if you're fighting against communism, is it justified for us to use the same brutal?
No, absolutely not. The question is that because the communists are always violating human rights, can we have certain leeway, sort of do a little bit something that's not too good in fighting them? No, absolutely not. In order to fight against evil, we got to first to be absolutely on the side of the good. Otherwise, it will be evil against evil and end up just a big mess. No, we have to strictly stick to our principles of whatever we consider it moral, ethical, and legal. We must never compromise. As a matter of fact, the most important part of this revolution is not with military means or violence or anything like that, because basically it's the mind. The communist power, they use force, yes, but the most important part of their success is to use the penetration with mind and utilize the intellectuals. In fact, one editor of a paper of Saigon, I gave a speech in Saigon in 1956, and I still have the Vietnamese newspaper. And in that speech, I said, if this country ever falls into the communist hand, it's your fault, because you are the transmitter of information. You can make or break this young government. And it was there. And a editor came out, and he was fighting mad. He wants to fight communism. He came to my office, and he saw this article. And he asked me, how many times did you give this speech? I said, once. What do you expect? It's your fault. He said, you should have given this speech every week, at least once a week. Then we'll learn. You see, I didn't know that you gave this speech, so he blamed me for losing the country. But It's interesting. As a matter of fact, another editor, I saw him on the street one day, and he was quietly, I didn't recognize him. He said, Mr. Yo, very kind. I turned around and said, yes, and tears ran down his eyes. He said, I remember your speech. You warned us. We didn't listen to you. I said, now we lost the country. So, that's my address. That's my telephone number. I have an open door policy, open phone policy. Anybody can call me. In fact, the Soviet embassy a couple of times had KGB guys walk right in. He said, I'm from Soviet embassy. I said, so what else is new? I said, what do you want? You want a defect? Very funny guys. So, okay, any other questions? Yes?
Just quickly, because I know we hear a lot of arguments about the third world, how they can't really have the same democracy we have. I guess you disagree with that, and I was wondering how you would respond to those arguments.
Look, one thing I've learned in my travels, in my association with all kinds of people, we people are the same. There is no difference. People like the same things. That's why Coca-Cola is so popular, okay? Hamburgers, even Kentucky chicken, I can make a better chicken than Kentucky, but still, it's Kentucky chickens in Tokyo and everywhere. See, people are the same. So whatever works in one country should work on the other. But the thing, of course, it's Americans should not transplant like the form of the government. The Vietnamese like to have their own form, same principles. The Chinese would probably end up, the principle are men are created by God. As a matter of fact, I didn't go further. The one part of the Declaration said, whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is right of people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such form that to them seem most likely to effect the safety and happiness. Do you know you, Americans, can alter or abolish your government? Can you imagine? This is the reason why it took the Congress 10 years, 11 years to come up with a constitution. It's so difficult it's such a revolutionary idea. It's almost impossible to come up with a constitution. Finally, they dickered and finally come up with a constitution. And then, even then, the people said, wait a minute. It didn't say anything about guarantee, how far the government can go, how far the government cannot go. So what happened? They put in 10 amendments to the Constitution. Some people call the 10 amendments the Bill of Rights. Wrong! It's a misnomer. There was never any mention of Bill of Rights in the discussions and debates. You know why? Because the 10 amendments to the Constitution is to restrict the power of the government. See? That's the most fantastic thing. Now, just imagine the Declaration of Independence is the power center, like the engine. So they had to build a vehicle around the engine to make it work, make it a vehicle. All right, so they build the body, the vehicle. So then, wait a minute, here's a vehicle, but what makes you think that the vehicle will go the direction the people want? Aha! They put in 10 amendments. See, the 10 amendments, it's clearly stated that for all intent and purposes, it should be considered a part of the Constitution. Yet if it's part of, why not stick it in the Constitution? Why did you put it in amendment? Very interesting, because the motion, you see, the vehicle is supposed to go forward. And the 10 amendments is a steering and braking mechanism to stop the vehicle. The only constitution ever written by men that has a braking system. The 10 amendments are not really guaranteeing the people freedom, no. Guaranteeing the people how they can stop the government. A lot of people don't understand. A lot of Europeans come here, and one day I was talking to a French journalist. She was poo-pooing ideas. America's crazy. Everybody can have a gun. Bang, bang, shoot up the place. I said, you don't understand. I said, do you know why the Second Amendment, immediately after the First Amendment, freedom of religion, freedom of this, freedom of that, immediately Second Amendment, the people's right to forbear arms is not to be infringed. Why? Why? It's easy to say the people have the right to alter, abolish a government. You try it without guns. See, the founding fathers give the people's right to have arms so that if, in case, some right-wing, left-wing, doesn't matter, take over Washington and then declare that martial law, like Marcos did 12 years ago. So what do? Ha-ha. How many millions Americans own weapons? Yeah, okay. So how long can you control? See, the founding fathers, every item is very carefully weighed. And these 10 amendments it's a fantastic document. That's why recently 15 editors from different countries, sponsored by the different papers, visited Washington, and the Fletcher School of Diplomacy arranged to send them to me in my office for me to brief them on the Constitution and the amendments and so on. And right off the bat, I asked them, most of every country, practically every country, has a sacred document. How many documents America has which consider sacred? 1, 2, no, 3. 3 parts. Declaration of Independence, Constitution, and the 10 Amendments. Absolutely marvelous. You had a question.
Did you, as a revolutionary, did you ever read still The Art of War when you were fighting?
Who?
Called it teaching? Sun Tzu?
Oh, Sun Tzu. Oh, sure. As a matter of fact, at War College, I was lecturer on Sun Tzu. But it's very difficult. Once I got carried away, one line took me the whole period, the whole to expend one single line. It's very difficult. As a matter of fact, one of the interesting things in my study is that Mao Zedong really never truly understood Marxism, because the Chinese language, he was a monolinguist. He could not read or understand any other language. So he read Marx only in Chinese translation. So parts of it actually was comical, because he was explaining the principles of contradiction. What he was talking about was polarity. It wasn't contradiction at all, the positive and negative poles, you know. He went on and wrote a whole piece on it, and he didn't even understand Marxism, because the linguistic barrier he couldn't cross, see. In fact, that was one of the interesting. On this campus, are there any revolutionary Communist Party movements, the Maoist movement? Are there any here? There's some in Midwest. As a matter of fact, once I had a young woman complain to, Accuracy Media is, we take complaints about the media problems and so on. We had they accused them of doing something which they didn't do. So she called me up to complain about it, and then I said, sure. So I took it up seriously and explained to the radio stations, the newspapers, that this group did not do it. Another Maoist group, Revolutionary Workers' Party, did it. And so I thought you should make a correction. And so they did. She was so surprised. She said, I heard your organization is a right-wing organization, and you took my complaint, seriously. You treated me, like, properly, and so I'm confused. I said, why not? I said, our organization is called Accuracy in Media, and there was an inaccuracy. You were accused of something you didn't do, so I just got them to straighten it out. Gee, that's just curious. Can I come and see you? I said, of course, I have open door policy. So she came. She's a representative. She's on the top echelon, the Revolutionary Communist Party member. And she, we talked about an hour and a half, and she was fascinated by my explanation how Mao doesn't understand class struggle and in a contradiction. And this lady was trained in China for 9 months. I didn't ask her what she learned there. all kinds of explosive making and terrorist activities. Good thing Gaddafi didn't get hold of her. She was pretty well trained. But anyhow, she was fascinated, and so after we talked for an hour and a half, finally she said, "Oh, I've got to go," and so she said, "Oh, it's just fascinating, interesting." Before she left, I said, "Hey, wait a minute." I said, "Where else can you go?" I said, "You can, promote your revolution here. They have a bookstore in downtown Washington. It's not a small little place. But can you go to Albania?" No, can't go to Albania. "Of course you can't go to China." "Oh, no. Be gang of four. They lock me up." I said, "You never could go to Moscow, can you?" No, couldn't go to Moscow. "So you have no place, none of your brother socialist place you can go?" "No, I can't go anywhere." So I said, "You better hope you don't win, because after you win, you can't even stay here, can you?" She stopped and never thought of it, and she was dumbfounded. She blinked her eyes and so on. I said, "Hey, you better join my revolution." She said, "Your revolution?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "My revolution, when I succeed, you can preach exactly as you're preaching now in Moscow, Peking, Tirana, everywhere else. Wouldn't that be better?" She never thought of that. Of course, if the world is free, naturally she can go to Moscow and, talk. That's when Russians are free. She walked out like a zombie. Didn't say goodbye or she walked out. 6 months later, her name was dropped from that list of the mess head. I kind of miss her. I like to, wish she would call me again. No? Any other questions? Anything at all? You want? Yes.
What is your view of the Sandinista government in Nicaragua, and who do you consider to be the revolutionaries there?
In fact, the grandson of Sandino, the original hero, was in my office 2 months ago. He denounced the Sandinista government. He said they're not following the true spirit of Sandinista. When they're got a little power, they shake head. Anything you ask them, they say no. When they get full power, they cut heads. 3 heads.
Well, it seems like there is a lot. There was a speaker on campus just last week from Nicaragua, and he said that they are not really Marxist-Leninists, that they follow certain communistic principles, but they also have a lot of private property ownership and other things, and also from other sources I've heard that that's just sort of a rumor that's being taken up, that because in this country you say that word Marxist-Leninist and it strikes fear into people when they don't really understand what that means, and I'm just confused as to what the basis is for saying that the government is such.
No need. People like Umberto Belli, people like Baldizon, who was the Interior Minister's chief lieutenant, Baldizon. Stan, do you have that Baldizon booklet? Pardon? He testified in Congress what he was, with his passport, everything, pictures. He was a very important man in the Interior Department. He testified in Congress here. He said he had just had enough. He couldn't take it anymore. All the dirty dealings. No, the person who spoke to you on behalf of the Sandinistas is not telling the truth. They cannot, because
you say that government is corrupt.
It's more than corrupt. Corrupt, it's probably a part of human nature to be corrupt. It's a systematic, totally programmed terror, control, and annihilation. You've heard of My Lai, right? What happened, Americans killed 100, 200. How many of you have heard of the Hue massacre? The city of Hue was the old imperial capital at one time. At Tet Offensive in January, end of January, February, the North Vietnamese unit occupied the city of Hue. It's spelled H-U-E with a hyphen. For 26 days, 7,000 people disappeared. Slowly, they dug up 4,000 bodies. Many of them were buried alive. Even 3 West German medical missionary people were buried alive. I have photographs of those people. And yet, the world never heard of it. It was absolutely clearly documented. You know that, don't you?
Documented on the PBS. It wasn't.
It was not. Yes. Have you ever seen our PBS, our movie on Vietnam? We did a counter-documentary called Vietnam, the Real Story. Charlton Heston narrated it. And,
That's the one that my mother was looking forward to.
okay, we have two sections. One is called Impact of Media. You'll like it. In fact, listen, let me tell you, we are so busy doing other things like the television and the news programs. We never dreamed that we would get into a motion picture production, but it was a Vietnamese here in Texas, in California, in Washington. They came and petitioned us. I still have 2 boxes of petition in my office. They said, please do something. You're the only people can do something. It's a disgrace how they use only North Vietnamese propaganda. Also, there was an important part in it, too, that North Vietnamese are all the good guys. The South Vietnamese are the corrupt and all the bad guys. There's a slight touch of racism in there, too. The North Vietnamese against the South Vietnamese, the good guys are in the North, the South. So, yes.
Is the new Chinese policy moving toward capitalism, is that long-lived, or do you see that only as an experiment, or will that blossom?
What's important, the question is whether about the Chinese policy, whether it's long-lasting or not. The problem is how the people view it. I've talked to a lot of people, students, and so on, in this country now. See, you've got to have a system or a government that the people can trust. Mao, after he created his socialism in China, he has been twisted back and forth many times. One day he said, let 100 flower bloom. And once you start saying a few words, he had them all arrested. Those are rightists. That's what I want to find out. You see? So he went back and forth so many times. So the people don't trust the government at all. What they're doing now is a good American phrase, make hay while the sun shines. So the people are working to profit themselves. They don't think about future. They said anytime the government can change policy and we'll be back where it started. So there's no support to any policy. They just do their own thing, and that's what's going on. There's no saving or no try to build anything. Yes, Dan?
The ethical premises that you talk about here are fine, but for the students, I think today, for this young woman down here, it's difficult to sort out. We believe if you accept that our system works better than the Soviet system, that's fine. But how does it relate to what's going on in Nicaragua? How can you deal with people who come to campus and represent themselves on behalf of the Sandinistas or on behalf of the country? I mean, how can you make, as an individual, an intelligent choice about where your support should be? That's really, I think, the question that she's asking, and I think the Vietnamese gentleman was kind of saying some of the same thing. We can see them as evil, but are we treading with the possibilities of evil by being, as characterized by those who are pro-Sandinista, the big bully who was trying to beat up on the North?
Well,
that's the dilemma for these
true.
days.
Thanks, Stan, for interpreting, because, yeah, it's a valid point. Very important. I guess the only thing to do is to reach out for information as much as possible. The information, they are available. Like I said, the document about the Sandinistas, defectors, and so on. These things, in my office, is piled up all over the place. But to spread this around it's another thing altogether. Tyrone, where are you? You're right here. I'm sorry, you're too close. I tell you what, I'll send as much material as possible to you, and you make it available to anybody who wants to. To start with, I'll send you, say, 20 or 30 copies of that Baldizon document. He's, with his passport and everything. He's absolutely genuine, the man. He said the Sandinista government even sent soldiers in Contra uniform to commit atrocities and to blame it on the Contras. Now, here's a man from the inside testified to that. So, I mean, there's no, anytime anyone wants any, yeah.
I'd like to say something about
Sure.
Nicaragua. I think that the United States has made a lot of accusations against the Sandinista government, and that gives the United States justification to support the Contras. But I think that having the Sandinistas did commit those wrong things, the United States would have supported the Contras in a way, because the real conflict is that we do not tolerate a communist, a Marxist nation in the Western country. And I think that is the real war, is against communism. It's not what they do. It's just that we do not tolerate communism, and that is responsible. That is the responsibility of the United States and of the free world.
Well, that's also understandable, right? For the safety and security of the United States. A friend of mine who is a motion picture producer asked me one day, someone asked her to make a special documentary on El Salvador and asked me, why should I do it? And I explained to her, now, you say, why should I, what's the difference between right-wing dictator and left-wing dictator? At that time, 1980, the situation in El Salvador was very, very messy. And I explained to her this way. A right-wing dictator, so-called non-communist dictator, yes, it's evil too. All dictators, I call it, it's like a tumor. It's an unhealthy growth. But you've got to be sure that one tumor is malignant, the other is not. Well, in a sense, the non-communist dictators are non-malignant tumors. Once they are removed, they usually, quit. Look at Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay. How many countries so-called right-wing dictators now turn democratic? That's one thing. And another thing, none of the so-called right-wing dictators ever pose a threat to the United States. For as the government's job is to secure for the American people, so it is their duty to safeguard it. So when you have a Marxist-Leninist government so close to the border, it's different from the Marxist-Leninist government over across the Pacific Ocean, in fact, on security-wise. There's a third thing also. For the people there, a non-communist dictator usually is random. Nicaragua, for instance, Somoza was the agent for Mercedes-Benz. Now, if you try to sell Cadillacs over there and put up too bad a competition, he's going to make life miserable for you. It's understandable. There's another dictator, forgot where, who's agent of Coca-Cola. And somebody tried to sell Pepsi-Cola there, and he got thrown out. Okay, you can understand that. But normally, under those non-communist dictators, people usually can make a living if you don't open your mouth too much, criticize the government too much. You usually left alone. And another thing, if worse to worse, you can leave. Always. Only a communist dictatorship do not let people leave. It's a strange phenomenon. I don't know why, but they love to keep people. They always keep people. There are people there, I don't know why. In fact, a man, what's his name, who was kept there for 60 years. He came out not long ago. CBS did a documentary on him coming out of the ice. He was a parachutist. His father was a communist in Detroit, took the whole family to join this great social experiment, American from Detroit. He died not long ago. Yes, sir.
In reference to the comments and questions about how to get a good source of information on what's happening in Nicaragua, I'd just like to recommend a specific source, which is the New Republic magazine. It's had an ongoing debate the last several months, which I found rather interesting, where the magazine came out in favor of Reagan's proposal to aid the Contras, $100 million, and 14 of, I think, the 17 contributing editors wrote him a letter opposing this policy, and they had articles on both sides, and several pieces of Arturo Cruz Jr., and several quite interesting comments and opinions in the New Republic over the last several months. I'd like to ask you about your comments on aid to the Contras and other overt or covert U.S. support for guerrilla movements. Does this represent imperialism on the part of the United States? Taint liberation, anti-communist liberation movements? What's your view of that?
No, one thing, I'm not very fond of these leaders of Contras. For one thing, they don't have the experience as guerrilla fighters, and I don't think they're doing a too good a job. You know, one thing about guerrilla fighters, you're supposed to rely totally self-sufficient. When you depend on outside support, you're not a real true guerrilla. But upon said that, but the fact is that the Contras are serving a very useful purpose. Today, El Salvador is much better off. The government has a chance to slowly get their act together because the infiltration and direction and the support by the Sandinistas toward the rebels in El Salvador is slackened because of the Contra operation. And Guatemala also, for the first time in a long time, Guatemala also is a democratic country, elected president, and the chance of Guatemala's survival depends very, very much on keeping the Sandinistas busy. So, if nothing else, just to buy time, the activities of the Contras is beneficial to the whole Central American situation. One of the most dangerous places in Central America is Mexico. It's a powder keg. And in fact, not long ago, a Mexican came to see me, and I asked him, why is your country so nearsighted? Why are you always helping the Soviets? And this guy is a very intelligent person. He asked me a question. Have you ever heard of Azatlan? No, never heard of Azatlan. Azatlan happened to be a mythical empire of the Aztecs. That their empire includes, yes, California, includes New Mexico. It's supposed to be all the way to the Utah border. This hunk of United States is supposed to be that mythical empire, part of the Mexican empire. Hitler made an overture to them. That's why Mexico was neutral, but secretly helping the Nazis during World War II, because Hitler promised them when he wins, he'll give that part of the United States to them. And the Soviet Union is making the same promise. So, yes.
I'm from Mexico. I'd like to make a comment towards that. The way most people, in a way, since I'm very much aware of what goes on, sometimes in the interior as well as in north of Mexico, the people in Mexico are not usually pro-communistic because there is a lack of information. There is a very tight control on the press.
Yeah.
The single paper factory is controlled by the government, and whenever the government wants to stop the press, it simply stops keeping shipping the paper. But it's also the government. I don't know what the stance is by the government, but the government in Mexico is extremely oppressive. And if most people have been keeping up with the news, people are starting to rise up in certain parts of Mexico. There are parts held by the communist rebels already.
I know.
And in the northern part also.
This man was explaining about that secret understanding of that elite, precisely that oppressive group you're talking about. They secretly hope that the United States will lose, so that you know,
also to on the word of use and on what you said about the land, I myself feel a certain kind of, I'll go ahead and say a little bit of anger, because as in any war, as in any invasion, each country commits certain injustices, and even before that, even before what the so-called Aslan Empire.
Yeah. Did I pronounce it correct? That's Aslan.
Before the Aslan Empire,
Yeah, never. Yeah.
there exist certain documents from the Spanish colonial times and the Spanish-Mexican government then that guaranteed certain huge parts of land to the Mexican citizens, which the United States should have honored, but they never did. There's, things can go either way.
Sure.
It's just a difference of...
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay, I'd like to elaborate on that. I was a cousin, but I was born in the U.S., so Mexican American, whatever you want to call it. And the way I see it, we stole land from Mexico, but I think I'd rather be over here than down there. So I guess I'm just glad the U.S. stole that land.
Well, no, actually, U.S. didn't have anything to do with it because at that time, when under the French control, it was sort of a vague. Texas was, I guess, Battle of Santa Ana. Well, anyhow, that part of history I'm not very familiar with. Sure. Yeah.
And that has always been my big concern, because I think in the revolution, if you're going to point the finger at somebody and say they're a bad guy, then you better be a good guy.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, all right. But the thing is this. Yeah.
That violation of human rights would be counterproductive to the person.
Of course. And they have publicly announced it. The Contra leaders have announced it. We don't believe in violation of human rights. And they repeatedly said, before our soldiers go to battle, they attend Mass first, because they are religious people. They have made such statements. So,
Would you give them the $100 million that they've gone through?
pardon?
Would you give them the $100 million aid? They don't do
If I have my way to operate things, I would do it quite differently. But since I'm not running the show, I guess a little help for them will sustain them and, keep the Sandinistas busy so they won't go to the neighbors and bother the neighbors, Salvador and Guatemala. Yes, sir?
Well, if you were running things, how would you do?
I would thoroughly retrain the Contras into a truly dedicated force and move very close into Managua. You see, the thing is, there is a myth about guerrilla warfare. Che Guevara got killed because he believed in that myth that in order to fight the guerrilla warfare, you've got to be in the countryside. Wrong. The whole entire Second World War, I was in Shanghai. I was a commander. Never was I was in the field to direct battles. And then after the battle was over, I went right back to Shanghai. As a matter of fact, one of the biggest battles we won very nicely. After we finished, I was back in Shanghai, in Park Hotel, on the 14th floor, enjoying a dinner, and sitting not 10 feet away from me was the Japanese admiral, having dinner right there. And right middle of the dinner, his aide rushed in, saluted, and pulled out the document. He stood up like that, because he lost his troops. We ambushed him, and it just was tremendous loss. He didn't even finish the dinner. He went like this and told his aide to pay it and rushed out to go and check it. And he didn't realize the person who commanded the operation was right behind him. So that's how you operate, guerrilla warfare. Pardon? I forgot. I left a good tip. And see, at that time, one of the important things in these operations, you got to control everything. For instance, in Shanghai at that time, every dining room, every cabaret, every nightclub, waiters, the kitchen, and especially musicians, all under my control. And any time there's some activities, they would call me up and something is happening, so on. So you got to know everything. And Stan, remember, some musicians are here now, and we visit them and remember the good old days. We were fighting guerrilla warfare in Shanghai, the city of Shanghai. So it's part of the thing. And yes, you do tip. You have to tip pretty heavily too. No, as a matter of fact, we on some occasions when there's a big festival where you have a lot of Japanese officers and they drink heavily. And it's interesting, the Japanese, I don't know why, they can't hold drinks. After a few of them, they just wobble all over the place. And the busboys in those places are always my pickpockets. They go around and pick all the pockets and photograph all the documents and slip back again. They told me it's easy to pick them out, but to put it back, that takes a master touch. But we succeeded. We are now, in fact, next to the pantry, we even set up a dark room to develop the film to see we got good documents or not. So that's the way you operate. And that's why the guerrilla warfare is entirely different. Yes, sir?
I've heard that there's between 4,000 and 15,000 convicts, and regular Sandinista army is about 60,000 to 120,000. I've often wondered how the countries fight with such limited funding. Are the countries perhaps limited that no one wants to join an army that has no bullets? How did you in China fight for your supplies?
We had to mold our own bullets, reload the cartridges, manufacture weapons. As a matter of fact, our arsenal was turning out 20 Mausers a day. And whenever we cut up a railroad track, that gives us a lot of supply of good steel. And when we blow up a locomotive, all kinds of pipes, all kinds of useful things on it. It's like. But once the big battle I told you about was written up in Admiral Miles' book called A Different Kind of War, but that one we actually captured enough weapon to supply 20,000 soldiers. It was a very important weapon transporter. You got to learn how to be self-sufficient. And one of the first things you do is manufacture and do with whatever you can get hold of. In fact, that's how I started to be an underground operator. I happened to be a collector of weapons, and I happened to know how to reload them. I was the only person that I know of in the city of Shanghai knows how to reload cartridges. And, you just, it's very simple. All you have to do is with the nail, hit the cap and blow the cap off, and put another new cap in it, and load it up with the right amount of powder, mold another piece of lead in it, and there you are. You got a bullet. Especially if you have some nail polish, put it on the rim so that you waterproof it. Oh yeah, nail polish is very, very handy. As a matter of fact, nail polish also makes dandy explosive. Very powerful. It's nitrite, yeah. You didn't know that, huh? In fact, hydrogen peroxide, bleach, makes a dandy explosive too.
I just want to make one last point for people in here and for the people of the United States. You seem to be trying to imply that the burden of faults of being sympathetic to communism rests entirely on Latin American nations. On part, I agree. But on part, it's also the fault of the U.S. foreign policy, because most Latin American nations, in fact, I'll let you say that all of them have a very deep anti-Yankee feeling. And that is nobody's fault other than the United States. The United States does have a pretty stern foreign policy in the sense that it meddles too much. If you and your wife are having an argument, would you like somebody to come in and argue, or to try to mediate when it's something from the family? So I think that's a very inherent fault of U.S. foreign policy. Like I said, for the benefit of the people here, they should try to help, see how to help them solve their own problems instead of going in and solving the problem for them. It's just like telling me or you that you are done and you're not capable.
That situation is quite a problem all over the world. That's what happened to Vietnam. In fact, in 1965, when I went back to Vietnam with General Lansdale, I said to the people, I said, I'm no longer useful here because the war, the Americans came and pushed the Vietnamese aside and said, hey, you guys, you don't know how to do it. Let me show you. So they just took over the war. And I remember in Da Nang, when the ships were unloading, it was an awesome sight. The machines was 6-story high, unloaded onto the docks. A huge helicopter carrying a little helicopter, into the land. And the Vietnamese standing there with a little rifle, open their mouth and look, wow, why should I fight? Look at this, all this stuff. I go home, Really, it was really a very negative thing to do. And I'm afraid, the bureaucracy in Washington is pretty messy. I tell you, I live there. I know every day there's something different changing with the wind and so on. There is no policy, really. There was change of administration, change of Congress. But one thing though, the important thing about America, of this country, is it is constantly changing. And other countries, if they have ways, means to change, those countries who are locked in, frozen, and I do mean you use that word frozen. The Russian people who left Russia 30, 40 years ago, when they go back again, they see nothing changed. Everything, the villages, everything exactly the same. My friend who is a doctor, who went back to the hospital he interned in, he said, on the wall, the little pencil mark he wrote on the wall, it's still there. They didn't even put a new coat of paint on the hospital. Everything's frozen. So if we just thaw the whole world, a third of our human race out, that's why I'm against keeping things status quo, because there's nothing, so wonderful that we should keep it as is now. There's plenty of room for improvement. But one of the most important things is that if those people, that 1/3 of human race, is freed, we could finally avoid a nuclear war. That's the bottom line.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for attending. I just wanted to point out we have an upcoming event which I think you all might find very interesting. Bernie was alluding to the accuracy in media video of the Vietnam War and the television coverage of it. We'll have 2 distinguished professors on campus that know about Vietnam. One professor, Larry Berman, who's written a book on Vietnam and who goes to conferences all over the United States discussing it. He's critical of the war, and he'll probably be critical of the accuracy in media video. The PBS video will be shown partly by Professor Medhurst, who has criticized that. It should be a good event, and hopefully you all can make it. It'll be on the other side of this building, right downstairs here. Otherwise, I'm sure Bernie will be able to field your questions if you just want to come up and meet him, and I thank you all again for attending.
No, that's the thing. People don't know.